Susie Wood doing my interview with my mother, Joyce Boker. So today we're going to talk about how my mom grew up during the Depression in World War II. So my first question is, what was it like for you to grow up during the Depression and the war?
The most I remember about it was that we had to have, during the war, we had to have stamps to get the things we wanted. If we wanted a new pair of shoes, rubber was rationed because it was used for the war effort. So we had to have tank stamps. You had to save those stamps. You got so many stamps every month. And my father was so, he wanted the shoes to last. He took me to Buster Brown, and bought me a pair of boys' shoes, boys' saddle shoes, so they would last longer. And I was so embarrassed going to school with my boys' shoes on.
What other types of things were rationed?
Sugar, tea, butter. That was a big thing. Tea was a big thing because nowadays everybody drinks green tea because it's good for you. The English never drank green tea. They had to have black pekoe tea. And it was very hard to get. It was grown in Indonesia, which was controlled by the Japanese. So it was very hard to get tea. And from an English family that drinks tea all the time, that was a very hard time. But to get ice cream and chocolate bars, for instance, the chocolate bars were sent to the GIs during the war. So it was a big treat to get a chocolate bar.
And how did the Depression affect the jobs for Grandpa? Did he always have work?
No, he was the young man at that time. It's not that different than it is now. Once you're established and you have a job, usually it's easier to get another job. But for new people coming into the business, into the trades at the time, it was pretty hard, and people got laid off, and my father was out of work because the union was on strike when I was born, and he was also out of work when my sister was born.
Where did he work?
He worked for General Motors for most of his life, Cadillac in particular. All through the war, when they stopped building Cadillacs and started making tanks, he worked there then too.
And what did he do for GM?
He was a pattern maker, a metal pattern maker. He made the pattern that makes the core of the engine block, that you make the engine block in, where the cylinders go, what runs your car. And he was the one who worked on the designs for the beginning of that, to make the core, to pour the metal in to make the engine block.
And was Grandpa part of the union? Did he like the unions?
Oh yeah. He had to go out and strike once in a while, and when the union went out and strike, you used to have to go down and walk the picket line. But they fought for the workers so that there wouldn't be discrimination against them by the bosses. The boss couldn't pay his brother-in-law more than he paid the regular worker.
And what was your home life like? Like at home during the Depression? Did you have a large family?
Well, when I was born, actually I came home excuse me, to a house with my grandmother and my aunt and uncle and my cousin and my mom and dad, and I was moved into the room that was just vacated by an Irish cousin who had come over from Ireland and had to get a job and work here. And it was like that all until the end of the war. We all lived together.
And what did Grandma do? Your grandma?
Well, my grandmother was a piano player, and she played for the movies, where we had silent movies at the time. And she would go and she'd play the fast music for when the horses were running, and the slow music for when they were making love or whatever it was. She played the romantic music. and you sat at that time down like in an orchestra pit, which was actually lower than the rest of the theater seats. And it was cold in the wintertime in Michigan.
Could people see him down there?
Yeah, but mostly just the top of them. But you wouldn't be watching the piano player anyway. You'd be watching the movie.
Did she like that?
Yeah, she did, but it was a cold job. It got cold and her fingers would get cold in the winter. She was in the musicians union. She actually, when she died, she had a gold card as having retired as a member of the musicians union for so many years.
What about your mom? Did she play the piano too?
Mom played by ear, and she just played for us. She played for parties, and when the relatives would come over, and we'd all sit around and sing.
So you said that all your family lived together during the war. How did your family feel about the war and the draft in particular?
Well, my father was too old for the draft. My uncle, who was 6'2" and weighed about close to 300 pounds, wanted to join the submarine corps, which was always a joke. But the young men were the ones who got drafted, and my cousin got behind in school. He didn't graduate when he was supposed to, so he got drafted when he was 18. In order to stay out of the infantry, because everybody thought that was the most dangerous place to be, he joined the Navy, and he was aboard the Indianapolis, which was a cruiser and the flagship of the fleet in the South Pacific.
What did the U.S. Indianapolis do for the war?
Well, in the invasion of all the islands in the South Pacific, they were, every one of them, Marshall Islands, in truck. The ship was dive bombed by a kamikaze plane in Truk Island, and they were at all the major battles of the Second World War. And then after the kamikaze plane hit the ship, it was sent back to dry dock in San Francisco, and that was right around the time of the first atomic bomb explosion. So we decided to use it, and of course none of us knew anything about this at the time. It was all secret. They needed a fast ship to carry the reactor from Los Alamos to wherever they were going to send it off from. I forget the name of the island. So they used the Indianapolis. They patched her up real quick, and because it was the fastest ship in the fleet. And the Indianapolis carried the Big Boy, I think it was called, the reactor, the bomb rather. It carried it all to Leyte, Guam to Leyte, which is where the plane took off. The Enola Gay took off from there. And they had to keep the reactor from the bomb separate so they wouldn't explode by mistake. So then, because the ship was on a very secret mission, it didn't have to check in at the time, and on the way back it was torpedoed, and nobody realized it was even missing for 4 or 5 days. So when you see the headlines in the newspapers, were big headlines that said the war ended, right below the fold is the story about the Indianapolis that was the last ship sunk in World War II. And I think there were 800 survivors and 1,600 died. And my cousin died in that accident.
So that was the ship that took the nuclear bomb over there, that obviously blew up, that ended the war.
Hiroshima.
And then he died on the way back. And one more question for you. Who's your favorite kid?